It's Gridiron Betting Insights right here on QLTV. I'm your host, Jay Sanin, and tonight we look back at week 7 in the NFL, an interesting week that it was. We talk about what we learned during week 7 in a segment that I cleverly call What Have We Learned? We look back at a second straight abysmal week of picks from yours truly in a segment we call Upon Further Review. We also take you through some interesting trends that have emerged through 7 weeks of the NFL season. And of course, at the end of the show, I get you an early look at my first pick in NFL Week 8 in a segment we call Early Action. Of course, the show tonight brought to you by BetQL. Use BetQL for all your NFL betting data needs. Over 10,000 simulations of each NFL game. They give you score projections, let you know where they see the game falling relative to the spread and total, I should say, as I have trouble spitting that out. And of course, you can apply that information to the actual spread and total, find value, and hopefully pick some winners. That's betql.co. Use promo code SANIN, SANIN, at the bottom of your screen for 20% off all subscriptions to BetQL. So let's get started here with a segment we do every week. It's called What Have We Learned? And as you can tell by the title of that segment, it's where we talked about what we learned from the past week on the NFL calendar. And we'll start just like we did last week, talking about the Dallas Cowboys, folks. Of course, last week we said, the Dallas Cowboys, they might be in trouble without Dak Prescott. Still don't have a great defense. Quarterback situation, not as good as it was with Prescott being out and Andy Dalton being the new guy at quarterback. Well, folks, what did we learn? We learned the Dallas Cowboys are in huge trouble without Dak Prescott because Andy Dalton, folks, was horrendous against the Washington football team this past week. Team put up 3 points. Of course, Dalton goes out with a concussion, which of course led to them bringing in a quarterback named DiNucci, who, while talking about the game with my father on Sunday, said it sounded like the Dallas Cowboys went to a pizza shop down the road from FedEx Field, found a guy working at a store named DiNucci's, said, hey, here's a uniform, here's a game check. We need you to go get your brains bashed in for a couple hours by Chase Young. He said, yeah, okay, if you order catering after the game from DiNucci's, then sure, I'll do it. And that's exactly what happened. He went out there, he got his brains bashed in, can't speak to the catering order after the game, but it wasn't pretty for the Dallas Cowboys, regardless of who was at quarterback. And that's something that needs to be made clear. We talk about Andy Dalton getting injured. Of course, that's going to hurt the quarterback situation for the Cowboys. But it should be noted they were abysmal with Dalton at quarterback for the majority of the game. So it's not as if they had something going and things went off the rails when Dalton went out. They were bad from start to finish offensively in that game. And of course, the only points they got for that early part of the game when Dalton was in there, it was a big kickoff return after a Washington touchdown. They take the ball, huge kickoff return. They go 3 and out. They kick a field goal. So it's not as if Andy Dalton was providing anything offensively before he went out. And of course, it only got worse from there. Of course, the Dallas defense still struggling, couldn't stop the worst offense in the league, in the opinion of many, in the Washington football team. They made it look easy. When Kyle Allen is out there looking good, that's when you know you have a bad defense. And the Cowboys right now, and it was confirmed this week, they just do not have an offense to make up for those shortcomings. They don't have an offense to keep up with what a good defense does out there. I mean, you could give them the defense that the Rams were playing yesterday against the Chicago Bears. It wouldn't matter. Andy Dalton and that offense aren't putting up double-digit points per game since Dak Prescott went out. That is a huge concern for this team, especially when you can't stop a nosebleed in the secondary and elsewhere in that defense for Dallas. And now we look forward, and what do we think for the Cowboys? We're going to see some big numbers, against this Dallas team going forward, and it's going to start with Week 8, where we take an early look at the lines, and the Cowboys over a touchdown underdog, 7.5 points to the Philadelphia Eagles. That game taking place on Sunday Night Football this coming week. And can I just say, okay, I get it. The Eagles and Cowboys, it's a rivalry game. Those are two brand names. One team has recently won a Super Bowl. The other is so-called the America's team. Can we stop putting the NFC East on Sunday Night Football? I get the bit. I understand. These are brand names in big markets. Can we wait till the division is good again to schedule this? Because it's not like this came out of nowhere. This division was always going to be bad, even if these two teams were supposed to be the best two in it. It was going to be a bad division from the jump. Stop putting these games on in primetime. I do not care about your ratings. The NFL is going to get ratings regardless. I am so sick of seeing these teams. I'm so sick of seeing the Giants in primetime. I'm sick of seeing Philadelphia and Dallas in primetime. I'm sorry. I had to get that off my chest. But either way, the Philadelphia Eagles are a team that should not be laying big numbers against anybody right now. We saw that on Thursday night. We'll talk about that a little later on in the show. But with this Dallas Cowboys team, it's hard to say it's not justified with how bad they've been since Dak Prescott has gone away. It is very difficult to say that things are going to get better anytime soon in Dallas with Andy Dalton or DiNucci or anybody else for the Cowboys. By the way, Ryan Fitzpatrick just got benched. Maybe make a move for him. Maybe do something to get him into that team, because right now that team needs all the help it can get to keep up with the bad defense. We also learned in week 7, talking about brand name football teams, not a bigger brand in the NFL lately than the New England Patriots over the last couple of decades. Well, they might actually be bad this season. Last week, kind of once and for all showed us, okay, no excuses. This team might be a bad football team. Of course, they lost the War of 1812. They lost 1812 to the Broncos a couple of weeks ago, a game where they lost to 6 field goals. By the way, second straight week we've seen a team kick 6 field goals in week 7. We saw the Bills do it in week 7 against the Jets. We also saw the Broncos do it against the Patriots. A lot of 6 field goal or more attempt games out there. A lot of teams trying a lot of field goals right now. But I digress. Patriots this past week, boy, they wish that they had a defense that could have held the team to 6 field goals. 33-6, they lost to the San Francisco 49ers. And listen, there's no shame in getting beat badly by a defending conference champion. The San Francisco 49ers, now that Jimmy Garoppolo is back healthy, now that they have some options in the receiving game and at the skill positions again, after all the injuries they suffered early in the season, no shame in that. Clearly the Niners, by the way, coming back nicely. But it's how they lost, 33-6. And really, it wasn't even that close. New England under 250 total yards for the game, ended up with less than 100 yards on the ground, less than 150 yards through the air. That's the real concerning part. Teams get shut down on the ground, and when you're behind, you're putting the ball in the air a lot. You might not have a big running game from time to time, but under 150 yards passing, that is unbelievable. Cam Newton had a horrid game for the New England Patriots. He was benched late in the game. Jarrett Stidham came in, although the Patriots have said Cam Newton will be the starting quarterback for the foreseeable future. So a vote of confidence there for Cam. But this was a game that we expected the Patriots to show a little life after they got kind of leaned on there by the Denver Broncos. The Broncos defense did a lot to slow down Cam in that offense, but there was kind of a reason behind that, or at least one that could be argued, in that the Patriots hadn't had a full week of preparation in a couple of weeks. They had the game postponed against Denver a couple of weeks ago, didn't have a full week of prep because of facility shutdowns leading up to the Broncos game. And then, of course, finally, you have a full week to prepare for the Niners. It looked like, again, they were a team that just hadn't prepared for a football game, and they got absolutely demolished. Not often you see a Bill Belichick coach team get beaten that comprehensively, and this could be what we see going forward from the Patriots as Cam Newton showing some inconsistency now. Maybe some of those early season performances not as good as we thought. Obviously, scoring points against the Seattle Seahawks is something that can be done by just about anybody they've shown. That doesn't look quite as good as it did back in the early portion of the season. Same thing with the Las Vegas Raiders, who they scored a bunch of points on. Now you look forward to this Patriots team, 3.5-point underdogs against the Buffalo Bills this week in what is, in my opinion, one of the more interesting games in week 8. And now the question is, can the Patriots get it together against the Bills defense that has not been very good this season, but in Buffalo, weather starting to become a factor up here in the Northeast? How is that going to affect things? Can Cam Newton get things back on track with the Patriots? We'll find out. What else did we learn in week 7? Ladies and gentlemen, we learned that the Green Bay Packers are just fine. A lot of questions asked about that Packers team after they got destroyed 38-10 by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I was one of the people asking those questions as they were heading into a second straight road game against Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans. Can the Packers defense hold up? Because they certainly didn't against Tampa Bay. Can Aaron Rodgers get it together? Can he get the offense back on track after such a bad performance against the Bucs? Answer to both of those questions, a resounding yes. They win 35-20 on the road against the Texans. To be fair, the Texans, not a great football team, horrid defensively, but Green Bay still had to go out there and get a win in their second straight road game after a big loss. They responded very nicely. Aaron Rodgers having a fantastic game in that contest, 4 touchdown passes. Of course, a couple of those touchdowns went to Davante Adams. Davante Adams, by the way, 13 catches, 196 yards. And I mean, just an incredible performance by that combination. And I mean, Houston, by the way, not a good defensive team. You're not expecting 196 yards for Davante Adams on a regular basis. But hey, you take it while you can get it. And of course, now Green Bay goes back home. They face a Vikings team that has struggled mightily this season. They are a big favorite in that game. But I think, beyond what we saw from the Packers, does this game not speak to how good Tampa Bay has been so far this season to hold this Green Bay team to just 10 points? Clearly, that's no easy task. Davante Adams scored more than that by himself against the Texans. So, yes, our takeaway here from week 7 with the Packers is they can respond to adversity. They're still a high quality team, even though they had one hiccup. But also, let's not forget, this also teaches us Tampa Bay Buccaneers have something good going on the defensive end of the ball to slow that offense down the way that they did. Good for them and good for the Packers. Could definitely see Tampa Bay and the Packers fighting along with the Seattle Seahawks for that NFC title, given what we learned here in week 7 and kind of the rest of the season. Finally, in what have we learned? We learned, ladies and gentlemen, Kyler Murray is the truth. What a game from Kyler Murray on Sunday Night Football to propel the Arizona Cardinals to a comeback win over the Seattle Seahawks, 37-34 in overtime. In the second half and overtime, Arizona Cardinals outscoring Seattle 20-7. And Kyler Murray, he got off to a pretty slow start this season. He was pretty even with his touchdown to interception ratio up until the Dallas game 2 games ago on Monday night. He lit up that Dallas defense. Everybody does that, though. So we said, hey, can he come into a home game against Seattle Sunday night? A lot of pressure on him, and deliver again against a team that many think will be fighting for the Lombardi Trophy at the end of the year, myself included, against, by the way, quarterback on the other sideline who may walk to the MVP award this season in Russell Wilson. He did that. He outperformed Wilson by virtue of committing fewer turnovers, 360 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. Wilson throwing 3 interceptions in that game. Of course, everybody talks about the one that Budda Baker made where DK Metcalf chased him down with some incredible athleticism. But that was one of 3 interceptions from Wilson. Murray avoided numerous turnovers and did enough to keep his team in the game when they were falling behind and managed to get them back where they needed to be to get a W. Arizona now just a half game back of Seattle for first place in that division. Of course, Arizona's played one more game. They're 5-2. Seattle's already had a week off. They are at 5-1. But give Kyler Murray a lot of credit. Who knows? Maybe he creeps back into the MVP race if he can keep playing the way that he has played over these last couple of weeks. And Arizona, we talk about Tampa Bay, Green Bay, and Seattle. But underneath them, you have a team here in Arizona with a better defense than Green Bay and Seattle, not Tampa Bay, and an offense that can keep up with just about anybody in this league when they're at their best. Consistency is the key to this team. Can they do it consistently enough? But based on what you've seen over these last couple of weeks, don't rule out the Arizona Cardinals to make a run in the NFC playoffs either. So that's what we learned in week 7, ladies and gentlemen. And now it is time for what's becoming my least favorite segment every week, upon further review, where we talk about how badly I've done at picking football games these last couple of weeks. My goodness, folks, this week 1-4-1 against the spread. I went all spreads this week, and it treated me poorly. 1-4-1. We dropped to 16, 18, and 3 for the season. The last 2 weeks, folks, 1-9-1. Statistically, that should be about impossible. But here we are. A combination of some bad reads and some bad beats have put us here. But we still have over half the season to go, plus the playoffs to get things figured out. So we'll talk about where we were right, where we were wrong. Of course, there was more wrong than right this week, but that's okay. I was wrong about the Cowboys and the Washington football team. I talked about it at the top of the show. Again, just did not think it was possible for Dallas to be quite so bad as they were in that game. But both sides of the ball failed miserably. And I think we're done backing the Cowboys as a contrarian play the way we have these last couple of weeks. It's good to be a contrarian sometimes when betting the NFL, but it's the picks still have to win, and the Dallas Cowboys have come nowhere close to that. So we will keep an eye on them from afar for the next few weeks and see what happens from there. Houston Texans could not keep up with the Green Bay Packers' high-powered offense. Honestly, thought the Texans would do more on offense. It got late in the game where they had to start going for it on fourth down. I think, if the game were closer, they would be able to treat those situations normally. Instead, gave the Packers some favorable positions to work with. But though the game was decided by then, the Texans just couldn't keep up offensively, and we move on. The Eagles, on Thursday night, we picked them as a 5-point favorite against the Giants. I tell you what, it looked good for a while as the Giants could not put anything together offensively in the first half. But how many red zone opportunities can you mismanage if you're the Eagles? Of course, they miss a less than 30-yard field goal at the end of the half. That would have put them up 6 at halftime. And, of course, they go for it on fourth down while they were trailing by only a little bit. But I guess, you lose faith in your kicker. You decide we're going to throw a goal line fade. Giants get away with pass interference, another red zone possession wasted. But I'll say this, if you're throwing a goal line fade, I'm not going to sit here and complain about pass interference because the goal line fade, as it is a bad play call. We'll take the L and move on. Unlike Daniel Jones running in a straight line in the open field, I'm not tripping over it, ladies and gentlemen. We got plenty of season left. Also, rounding out the where I was wrong section, the Chicago Bears couldn't score in the red zone, out of the red zone. They couldn't score, period, against the Los Angeles Rams. They lose 24-10. And it's upsetting because the whole handicap there was the Bears are going to shut down a Rams offense that hasn't beaten anybody so far this season. And for the most part, they did. You give up 24 points in an NFL game, you got to feel pretty good. But they just could not muster anything on the offensive side. I've been saying it, by the way, Nick Foles, Mitchell Trubisky, really not a huge upgrade one way or another. And that came to fruition, unfortunately, to the tune of only 10 points scored. Now, before we get to where we were right, we had a push this past week, and it was one of the bad beats of the week. Of course, I'm talking about the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals. Back and forth game. Cleveland's defense, boy, I tell you what, not a good defense when you make Joe Burrow look good. That's exactly what they did. Unfortunate circumstances there. But Baker Mayfield played a fantastic second half, even without Odell Beckham Jr., who's now lost for the season with a knee injury, moving the ball effectively. End of the game, throws a beautiful pass to Donovan Peoples-Jones, who does a great job of keeping his feet in bounds. Browns are going to win the game. They're up by 3, kick the extra point. And of course, at that point, the extra point is significant because if it goes in, then Cincinnati needs to score a touchdown in order to avoid losing the game. But Cody Parkey misses the extra point, gives the Bengals a chance to tie the game in the field goal. Of course, they couldn't do it, but a significant missed extra point there. This wasn't one of those garbage time bad beats. This mattered to the game, and yet it still didn't go my way. We take a push there instead of a win, which in the context of this week, it would have helped. 2-4 feels a little bit better than 1-4 in a push. But either way, where I was right, a lot less to talk about. The Pittsburgh Steelers managing to hold on against the Tennessee Titans, and very impressed with the Steelers. They went out and punched the Titans in the mouth, something that no team has been able to do so far this season. Titans made it very interesting in that second half, and both of these teams with some interesting games coming up, of course, headlined by the Steelers going to Baltimore now to take on the Ravens in a battle for AFC North supremacy. Very excited for that. course, we'll talk about that more on Thursday when we preview every game coming up this week. Now that we've gotten through my self-flagellation here, we can talk about some interesting trends that have emerged through the first 7 weeks of the NFL season. Some team against the spread trends, and of course, some totals trends as well. So you can keep them in mind when you're doing your betting for week 8 and beyond. We'll start by saying this. Of course, these are the closing line records against the spread and with the totals. They may differ slightly from what you have, as you lock bets in at different points in the week. Just want you to keep that in mind in case you say, oh, wait, in week 4, didn't they push instead of win? We're going with the absolute closing line for the game as opposed to what you may have gotten on Saturday, Sunday, or earlier in the week. Of course, get the best number you can, or at least try to. You don't have to wait right up until kickoff to take your bets. That's all I'll say about that. So we have some against the spread trends here that I think are pretty interesting. We have 6 teams so far this season that are 5-2 or better against the spread this season. And it's an interesting mix because you'll see some playoff teams in here, but you'll also see some teams that are nowhere near the mix for the postseason. Steelers and Packers, 5-2 against the spread this season. Not all that surprising because their record is right about there also. But another team, they're 5-1 against the spread, not 5-2. You have 6 teams that are 5-2 or better. At 5-1, you have the Steelers and Packers. You also have at 5-1 the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers 2-4 straight up on the season, but they've done a great job of being competitive this year. They covered on the road on Monday night against the Saints. And of course, they've covered a couple of games at home as well. They've done a very nice job getting Justin Herbert acclimated to things early, and the results have been excellent against the spread for them so far at 5-1. Of course, the Packers and Steelers are teams probably going to be in the playoffs. Chargers not looking great at 2-4, but again, against the spread doesn't really matter. Now the Chiefs, Cardinals, and Bengals, they are at 5-2 against the spread this season. And again, you have the Chiefs and Cardinals both looking like playoff teams, or at least contenders to make the postseason. Cincinnati Bengals, nowhere near that. And of course, Joe Burrow's been very up and down in his rookie campaign. But again, you're getting big numbers. You always have a chance to cover the spread. So those are your good teams against the spread. Now we'll look at some teams that have struggled against the number so far this year. We have 6 teams that are 2-5 or worse against the spread this season. Eagles, Falcons, and Jaguars, all 2-5 against the spread. Jets and Texans are 1-6 against the spread. And the Dallas Cowboys, folks, 0-7 against the spread so far this season. And it's interesting because you might think that some playoff caliber teams would be down in this area. You would think, okay, they might be laying bigger numbers as the favorite. And even if they win some of their games, they might not cover the spread in all of them. And while that's true, these 6 teams are, of course, I guess the Eagles are technically a playoff contender at 2-4-1 or whatever they are. There's a tie involved. They're not good. You would expect maybe some good teams to be down here in this category, but there aren't right now. These are kind of the bottom dwellers of the league. I'm very surprised the New York Giants aren't in this category as well. But it's interesting to see the distribution. At the top, you see a lot of playoff teams, but some teams that aren't in the mix either. At the bottom, so far, you're really seeing the dregs of the NFL. And you got to imagine with home field advantage not being as big of a factor this season, that's why you're getting that. Whereas if the Philadelphia Eagles had 80,000 people throwing batteries at their opponents, maybe you see a different story here. Now, when it comes to totals, you have some teams that are, again, very consistent to the over, very consistent to the under. We'll start with some over teams. The New Orleans Saints, 6-0 to the over this season to lead the NFL in over percentage this season. Las Vegas Raiders, right there with them. They've covered in every game except for one push. They're 5-0-1 to the over so far this season. That push coming against the Buffalo Bills in Vegas. Tennessee Titans, What do we think about the Tennessee Titans? We think of them as this ground and pound team with Derrick Henry and all that. Listen, they have been airing it out. A.J. Brown has been incredible. They are a team that puts up points in bunches, and they give up a few as well. 4-1-1 to the over are the Titans this season. Cleveland at 5-2 to the over. Seattle 4-2 to the over, even though, of course, we think that every Seattle game is going to go over with how powerful that offense is. Now, when it comes to the under, we have the Giants, Bears, and Rams at 5-2 to the under on the season. And we have the Arizona Cardinals to lead the way, 6-1 to the under so far this season. And again, Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk, Larry Fitzgerald, so many weapons on this Arizona team. But you have to remember they play defense as well. They are a very strong defensive team, which helps to keep the totals down. And that's why we've seen so many unders for the Arizona Cardinals so far this season. So again, very interesting stuff, things to keep in mind when making your picks, not just in week 8, but you want to keep an eye on these numbers throughout the season. And speaking of week 8, here comes our week 8 early action. This week, it is going to be a total. Spreads were abysmal to us last week. Let's take a total here in our early action, and we are going to do so with an over. Raiders and Browns over 53.5 is the early action pick for this Tuesday. Now, this total has come down a couple of points, opened at 55.5. And I like the over here for a few reasons. First of all, we just talked about those total trends. And what do you see with these two teams? A combined 10-2-1 to the over so far this season. The Browns had both of those unders. They came against the Baltimore Ravens in week 1, and they came against the Pittsburgh Steelers just a couple of games ago. Now, what does that tell us? Two teams with strong defenses who can move the ball and keep it away from their opponents. Those are the two teams the Browns have struggled to put up points against. And it's not surprising because just about every team struggles to put up points against the Ravens and the Steelers. Against every other team in the NFL, these two teams 10-1 to the totals. Overs everywhere to be found. And you look at these two teams specifically, both of them are in the bottom 10 in defensive efficiency so far this year. And we've seen it time and time again. We've seen the not the Oakland Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders. We just saw them get lit up by old man Brady. We've seen them get lit up by Josh Allen. Something that has not aged well over these last couple of weeks, by the way, is Allen struggled with the Jets and the Chiefs. He struggled a bunch these last couple of weeks, but he didn't struggle against the Raiders, put up points in bunches against them. Meanwhile, you look at the Browns, they're a team that has struggled defensively against the likes of Joe Burrow a couple of times, who, again, not a consistently good quarterback at this point in his career. Derek Carr and Baker Mayfield, even without Odell Beckham, should be able to put up some points here. Road games for the Raiders so far this season have gone over by an average of 14 points per game. The Browns, their totals at home so far this season have gone over by an average of 12 points per game. So we have seen room to spare on the totals going over for these two teams, both at home and on the road so far this season. I expect that to continue in this game. I don't trust either side to get a stop, and both of these teams have just competent enough quarterback play where I think there are going to be plenty of points. I think this game could very well get into the 60s with both sides scoring in the 30s, but we don't need that. We just need to get to 54, and I think that will happen in this ball game. So that's your early action for this week. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your GBI show for this Tuesday. I want to thank everybody for tuning in on this Tuesday night or whenever you watch it on demand. Of course, we'll be back Thursday. We will have your degenerate pregame show for Falcons Panthers, a very interesting Thursday night game as the Carolina Panthers take on a franchise that is legitimately cursed in the Atlanta Falcons. And of course, we'll have previews of every other game on the schedule in week 8 in our quick slant segment. And I will try and improve on a 9-1 run these last couple of weeks on NFL picks. I feel like I'm a man who is disappointed, a lover in bed, as I sit here and try and say, "Oh, this never happens to me." But we'll see if we can avoid it in week 8. Again, thank you to everybody for tuning in. We will see you Thursday. Until then, good luck with your bets.